sang. A purple and green light danced on the sky above us. Smoke rose up through the air, and shadows danced on our faces. We sat in a circle and held our hands. As he was singing, I watched how the wound on my brother's leg was healed right in front of my eyes. We called him Väinämöinen, the eternal singer, and with his songs he could create anything. He sang a verse, and the ground was covered in a white blanket. He sang another, and a storm rolled in upon us. But one day, a woman looked him straight into his eyes and said to him, "Yes, I will agree to marry you if you build me a boat." Väinämöinen looked back at her and blushed in silence. He went over to his hut and started crafting a song. For a whole month, he sat in front of a blank paper, calling for the words that would build him a boat, but in vain. So then, he walked into the village and asked his friends for help. "You should ask the giant," one of them said. "Antero Vipunen will give you hundreds of words and thousands of tales. It won't be easy, but it's worth a try." Väinämöinen rushed over to Ilmarinen the smith and said, "Forge me a pair of iron shoes, iron gloves, an iron shirt, and a staff of steel. I'm gonna go visit the giant." "You're gonna go visit who?" "Antero Vipunen, the old giant. He's been dead for hundreds of years already." "That's impossible," said Ilmarinen. Väinämöinen didn't bother. He marched out in the forest and walked for a whole day on women's needles, for 2 days on the sword tips of men. For 3 days he crawled on the blades of axes until he finally reached the grave of the giant. Vipunen was completely overgrown by bushes and trees. You could barely see him where he lay. A birch grew on top of his forehead, a big fir on his throat. A huge pine rose upon his belly, and a thick moss covered his skin. Väinämöinen took out his sword and started chopping off the bushes. He chopped off the birch, chopped off the fir, chopped off the pine, and when the whole grave was cleared, he climbed up on Vipunen's enormous face and walked slowly towards his mouth. When he stood with each foot on each of Vipunen's lips, Väinämöinen took his staff and plunged it down between the teeth. "Rise up," said Väinämöinen. "Rise from the deep sleep that you're taking." He pushed the staff a little deeper, and then suddenly the giant opened his eyes. Vipunen flung his jaws open and swallowed Väinämöinen in one bite. The hollow sound of bones and skulls rang in the air as Väinämöinen crashed onto the bottom of the belly. There was an acid smell of rotten, decayed animals. The air was thick and humid. Väinämöinen walked round with his hands against the wall, searching for a way out. "I've eaten many creatures in my days, but I have never tasted something like this," Vipunen muttered to himself. Then he closed his eyes and lay down back on the ground. "Antero! Antero! Antero!" Väinämöinen screamed, but the giant took no notice of him. He walked round in circles and started biting his nails. Didn't work. He tried another song. Nope. Also didn't work. Maybe this one. No. Also no success. Väinämöinen sang song after song, while the cave grew bigger and bigger around him. Finally he lay down among the bones, and the only thing he could hear was his own heartbeat. He looked at his gloves and whispered up to Vipunen. Words shall not be hid, nor spells be buried. Might shall not sink underground, though the mighty go.
Tulta iski ilman ukko.
He sang his gloves into a fire.
Palautti valkeata.
Then he looked at his elbow and sang it into a sledgehammer.
Tulta iski ilman ukko. Palautti valkeata.
Väinämöinen sang himself into a smith and started hammering away inside the belly.
Miekalla tuli terällä, säilällä kenevällä. Iski tulta kinteensä, järskitti jäsenensä.
He hammered on the lungs, the kidneys, the heart, while smoke rose up from the throat of the giant. I will not stop until you sing me your songs! Then the fragile voice of Vipunen broke the silence of the forest. He rose up. His head reached over the treetops. The river stopped running. The wind stood still, and even the sun came to listen while the moon bent over to take notes. Väinämöinen was stunned. Tears streamed down his cheeks, and he remembered everything we have forgotten. After a while, his tears turned into laughter. He started dancing and singing along to the song of the giant, learning every word he sang. Still to this day, Väinämöinen is singing. He is not inside the belly anymore, but far out in the horizon where the ocean meets the sky. He is sitting in his boat, with the wind in his hair, singing songs about his people. The woman who asked him for the boat finally went for another guy, but that's another story.